Good afternoon and welcome back to Commentators Corner. This is episode number 9. Brendan Preisman, Tyler Reedy back with you. Back-to-back days. We've got a lot to cover, as we said yesterday. And Brendan, today we've got prep football game. We talked about that yesterday. It's happening today at 7 p.m. But the subject of today's show is going to be winter sports because we got those getting ready to go. The NHL is already underway, started on Tuesday night. And we'll get to that after the NBA, which is beginning on Tuesday. So we've got in-depth previews for both. So it should be a loaded episode.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations to Zach Quo, the prep senior. Won number 1 singles today, 6-3, 6-0. And Sean and Nathan Ramachandran finished second in doubles. So congratulations to all three of them and the entire Creighton Prep tennis team. But on to the basketball. I have been waiting.
One more thing. I got to say congrats to the cross-country team winning districts as well.
Oh, of course.
Got to get that in there from yesterday.
Winning districts. Special shout-out to Dennis Chapman, the sophomore, finished 5th. Carson Naker up in northeast Nebraska ran a 14:58 in districts.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's an underclassman as well, I believe. So
oh my gosh.
He's going to be there for a while. Anyway, on to the basketball. We've been waiting for this for a long time. We've actually had it be the subject of a few of our What Is Happenings. You remember Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving. We've been over both of them. They are both still hanging over this season as well, so let's dive right into it. I'll start with the Eastern Conference. I think there are 4 legitimate finals contenders this year in that conference. So for the Nets, I could see them getting as high as maybe 60 or so wins. I could also see them getting below 50 if they have some health issues. I think their key player is a guy who's not going to be there this year. At least it doesn't seem like he is. Kyrie Irving right now, it does not appear he is going to participate in any of the games that the team is playing. So my biggest question for them, are James Harden and Kevin Durant enough for a finals berth, especially in a pretty solid Eastern Conference?
And can they stay healthy?
Can they stay healthy? That's also important. We saw Durant was pretty healthy for most of the year, but Irving went down last year, Harden went down. By the end of it, it was basically just Durant, and as we saw, that wasn't enough to even make the conference finals. So they got to be really careful with that. Another championship contender is the team with the belt around its waist currently, the Milwaukee Bucks. I could see them being potentially the best team in the league this year. I could see them getting as high as 65 wins. Key player, Giannis Antetokounmpo, defending finals MVP. His last 3 seasons have been MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, and Finals MVP. So he is pretty good at this whole basketball thing, and he also may have added to his game. There was a couple of clips of a preseason game for the Bucks versus the Utah Jazz, who we'll get to in a bit, where he was making jump shots consistently. If he adds that, they may have to fold the league, but my biggest question for them is there going to be a letdown? Because that's a team that plays really well together. They're very talented. The only thing stopping them is really getting in their own heads about being the defending champs.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The other thing I might add with them is the division they're in. You look at Brooklyn coming out of the Atlantic, you've got 2, maybe 3 other playoff teams as well in Philadelphia, which you'll get to in a second. New York, Boston could get in there as well. And then in the Southeast, Atlanta's got Miami to contend with, but Central, it's Milwaukee and who else really? I mean, Indiana got in the play-in round last year. Maybe they sneak back in there again this year, maybe not. But Milwaukee certainly has the easiest division run in the East. So the question becomes, do you take your foot off the gas a little bit in the regular season so that you are at full strength for the postseason? Because Milwaukee, I don't think, is necessarily going to need a crazy regular season to secure a top seed.
I agree.
It's going to be all about the playoffs for sure.
Yeah, I've got 3 of the teams in their division, the Raptors, then the Cavaliers and the Pistons, all finishing well out of the playoffs. And Indiana, as you mentioned, I've got them in the play-in. So definitely an easy road for Milwaukee. One team it could also be an easy road for is the Miami Heat. Remember, they were a finals team 2 years ago, and that was not a bubble fluke. That was a team that played really well together, led by Jimmy Butler. Bam Adebayo is a legitimate NBA big. And now they add Kyle Lowry. If he's still at that level he was like in 2019 and 2020 when he was the point guard on a Raptors team that won the finals and then nearly beat Boston in the conference semifinals, this team ceiling raises significantly to finals contenders. But if he's not at that level, if he starts to age a little bit, then their ceiling becomes second-round exit again. So And then the biggest question is, come playoff time, can you rely on Jimmy Butler to play like that again? Because that is starting to seem like a little bit of a one-off for him. And then, as you also mentioned in their division, the Atlanta Hawks, I think I could see them going as high as 57 wins this year. Ooh. Because I really, really like Trae Young. I know I shouldn't. I know he came out of Oklahoma. I know that as a Texas fan, I'm not really supposed to like people who come out of Oklahoma, but he is good. Last year, 25-9-4, 15th in the league in scoring. I think he's going to have an MVP campaign this year. My biggest question is about him because we saw what he could do in the playoffs. He took this team to the conference finals and won a game in Milwaukee by dropping 42 points and 11 assists. He's going to be there. The biggest question is, will the supporting cast, John Collins, Clint Capella, Kevin Huerter, will they take a leap forward as well? If they can, I could see the Hawks making the conference finals again.
Yeah, and is that supporting cast enough to be better than those of Brooklyn and Milwaukee? Because if Brooklyn and Milwaukee stay healthy, and maybe even Philadelphia, those teams are going to be really, really good at their core.
Yeah.
Is Trae Young going to be enough for Atlanta? And if he's not, can the guys around him step up to overcome that? And then Miami, which you talked about at first, that defense I think is going to be really good. You get P.J. Tucker from Milwaukee, Kyle Lowry coming from Toronto. Just last year, postseason, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, all struggling mightily offensively. Can they bounce back? And if they can't, is there enough support this season from Lowry and Tucker? And if there isn't, is their defense going to be enough? So a lot of questions around Miami. I think Atlanta's probably the surefire winner in the Southeast, but could be interesting to see how the Heat go.
Yeah, the rest of the East isn't really too interesting. Boston is definitely going to make the playoffs, but I think the only way they snag a top 4 seed is if Jason Tatum has like a top 3 MVP caliber year, because he's good, Jaylen Brown's good, but Kemba Walker's gone now. Really, who else does that team have besides them? The Chicago Bulls, I think, are going to be a trendy new playoff pick this year. A lot of key additions. Zach LaVine's still there. They went out and got Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic. So I think they're going to make the playoffs. But, is Zach LaVine really going to be the best guy on a contender in the East? Because if he is, then the way I see it is that everybody else probably got hurt. And then the only other team I think has a real shot to make the conference finals, barring injuries to everybody else, Philadelphia. Joel Embiid, last year, 28 points, 11 rebounds a game, second in the MVP race. So we know he's going to bring that back. We know he's a great player. They've still got a good supporting cast. Biggest question with Philly, though, is what are you getting from Ben Simmons? First off, are you getting Ben Simmons? The answer to that seems like probably. He is passed all of the COVID tests and will be, at the very least, in attendance for their preseason game tonight. But if you're getting Game 7 against the Hawks, 2 of 4 shooting, 5 points, Ben Simmons consistently, you're not going to make the conference finals.
Yeah, and if Philadelphia decides to deal Ben Simmons at some point, what can they get back? Because Joel Embiid is in his prime. I mean, it's win-now mode. You've had your chances the last couple seasons, but this is about it. You got Joel Embiid. You've got a core that's pretty old, a lot of veteran players in there, and Embiid obviously at his peak. So if you're going to trade Ben Simmons, you got to get something back that's going to help you win right now, especially with the East being as loaded as it is.
And getting something of value is going to be difficult because, again, all the other NBA teams saw that playoff series against the Hawks as well. And with Simmons' contract, they might not be willing to give that up. And really the rest of the East is solid to bad. You know, maybe Julius Randle and the Knicks make a run. Maybe LaMelo Ball and the Hornets make a little run, and we get to hear more of Eric Collins going crazy for dunks because he's one of our favorite team announcers for the Hornets. But other than that, you know, Cade Cunningham could be fun on the Pistons, but that's about it for the East. On to the Western Conference, I see 3 main championship contenders in here, maybe 2.5, but first definite one, obviously, is the Los Angeles Lakers. Everything appears to be fine in the City of Angels once again. LeBron James looks healthy. Anthony Davis looks healthy. And they went out and added a couple of wily veterans to help them, Carmelo Anthony and Russell Westbrook. So the big question for this team, as it has been the past couple of years, is health. Because when they're healthy, there hasn't been a team in the league that looks like they can hang with them, except for maybe the Nets. But even the Nets, they're still a pretty flimsy super team as it is. We still haven't really seen Irving, Durant, and Harden play together consistently, and we still won't this year, barring a vaccination for Irving. So I think the real issue for LA is, what type of Russell Westbrook are you getting? Are you getting the Westbrook that you had earlier in his career, where he was more willing to be a facilitator, more willing to be like a secondary or tertiary option and just focus on, the intensity plays, the hustle plays, and the passing? Or are you going to get 2012 to 2020 Russell Westbrook, where he's pretty inefficient, shoots the ball too much, really has to have the ball in his hands at all times? Because if they're getting that from him and it's not consistent and it's not actually putting points on the board when LeBron and AD are on the bench, they could be in trouble.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. Health's going to be the big thing for the Lakers. They're basically the Brooklyn of the West in that regard. You've got to keep your three big stars healthy, because if not, you're going to be in some serious trouble come playoff time, like we saw with the Nets last year against Milwaukee. And then being in the Pacific Division, which is absolutely loaded this year, we got several other teams to get to after the Lakers.
Yeah.
Depth is going to be key. Lakers added Malik Monk, Kendrick Nunn this offseason. Can they bring some young firepower, maybe bolster some things, get things fired up when the big guys might not be going right, or if they're unhealthy? So depth's going to be key for the Lakers, and they might have some.
Speaking of depth in the Pacific Division, let's go on to maybe the only team that has a chance at felling these Lakers if all else is equal. The other Los Angeles team, the Los Angeles Clippers, coming off the first conference finals appearance in franchise history last year. That was very fun to watch. I was very happy for that. But bad news for the Clippers. In the second round last year against the Jazz, Kawhi Leonard partially tore his ACL, so he is out for, at the very least, most of this regular season, possibly all of it in some of the playoffs. So the big question for the Clippers is, Kawhi's probably not coming back all regular season. Paul George had 23, 7, and 5 last year in the regular season, boosted those averages significantly in the playoffs, helped take down the Jazz, nearly forced the Suns to a 7th game. Can he play like an MVP this year? Can Terrence Mann play like a most improved player, like many expect him to? Because he was the guy who came off the bench and had 41 points against the Jazz in the clinching Game 6. So if both those guys can keep their playoff level intensity up, the Clippers are deep enough, Reggie Jackson, Ivica Zubac, guys like that, that they could really make a run at the finals this year, especially if Kawhi comes back. But you got to have the guys step up in the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with the division being so stacked. You got to get a good spot, and Paul George is going to be the main man. I think he's a little bit reinvigorated after his playoff run. Had a couple massive games on the road to steal games for the Clippers last season. That was a fun run to watch for sure, even coming from me, who's not a Clippers fan.
I cannot explain how fun that run was. Another fun team to watch last year, and a fun team that's going to be another fun team to watch this year is going to be the Denver Nuggets. They've got the defending MVP, Nikola Jokic, on their team. Last year's average is 26 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists. First true center to win MVP, I believe, since Shaquille O'Neal back in 1999-2000. So he's a good player, but the Nuggets, much like the Clippers and Lakers, also suffered injuries to a very key player. The Lakers lost Anthony Davis for the second half of their playoff run. Clippers lost Kawhi Leonard. The Nuggets lost Jamal Murray, who helped drag them to the conference finals 2 years ago, to a torn ACL early in this regular season. He's out for a while, so now the onus comes on Michael Porter Jr., their recent pick from 2018, I believe, who they have signed to the maximum contract extension. Now, he's a solid player. I've seen a lot of flashes from him that I really like, but can he be a consistent second option on a team with championship aspirations for an entire season?
Yeah, Jokic is going to be the guy. You mentioned Porter Jr. Aaron Gordon there as well could provide some help for the offense, as could Will Barton, but it's all about how much they can accomplish before Jamal Murray gets back, as he said. But they'll be chasing Utah, that's for sure.
They might be, yeah, and let's go straight to Utah because they are one of two, I think, paper contenders in the West, and I'll get to the other one right after them. But the Jazz I could see being potentially one of the best regular season teams in the league again. They had the best record in the league last year, were the 1 seed, and then couldn't quite deal with the Clippers in the second round, despite the series being tied at 2 when Leonard went down with his injury. Donovan Mitchell, 26 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists last year. He's perennial All-NBA candidate. Rudy Gobert is perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate. those two are solid, but I'm starting to wonder, is this looking like another duo from the Jazz's past? Is this starting to be more of a John Stockton, Karl Malone type duo where it's always, oh, yeah, y'all did great in the regular season, but come the postseason, kind of flattened out a little bit. I just do not see this team in this West making the conference finals. I just don't think they have enough around Mitchell and Gobert. I think you could if you had a third option like maybe a Michael Porter Jr., maybe a Russell Westbrook, but they don't, and I think that's going to cost them.
Yeah, the one thing I do like about the Jazz is the roster stability they keep from last year.
Mm-hmm.
You keep that core that was so good in the regular season, maybe the best three-point shooting team in the regular season, and then it all dried up in the playoffs in that series with the Clippers. Couldn't get it done.
Mm-hmm.
They've had that experience now. They're still all together, and we'll see if they can learn from it and potentially become more versatile this year or make some changes to the way they go about things in the playoffs.
Yep.
So Jazz will be very interesting to watch for sure.
And here's the other paper contender, the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker's here, put up over 25 a game last year. Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton's a really underrated player, I think. Chris Paul, you've obviously got not only the great point guard skills, but also just the veteran leadership he brings to that team. And they are coming off a finals berth, but my big question for them, how much of last year was a fluke? You look at who they went through. They played the Lakers and 1-6. The Lakers lost Anthony Davis after Game 2, didn't win another game. They played the Nuggets, won that series in 6 as well. Nuggets didn't have Jamal Murray for any of that. They played the Clippers, 1-6. Clippers didn't have Kawhi Leonard. Then they ran into the Bucks in the finals. Bucks had everybody healthy, 1-6. I like this team. I like a lot of the guys on this team, but right now I do not trust them to go up against a healthy opponent. I just don't.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how Phoenix in the West is somewhat similar to how we view Milwaukee's postseason run in the East, because Milwaukee had a similar situation going through a Brooklyn team that didn't have Kyrie and had a Harden worn down, and then they went through Atlanta with Trae Young not at 100%. So Phoenix, how legit are they going to be? As you said, how are they going to stack up with the Lakers, with the Nuggets, and the Jazz as we begin this regular season? Those games early on with those teams that are healthy right now, as the Suns are obviously healthy as well. Those games, healthy team against healthy team, I think that's going to be very telling as to how the Suns are going to stack up this year.
I think it could be too. And now we get to the teams that aren't quite title contenders, but certainly could be propelled there if their star guards have great years. First one there, Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry, scoring leader last year on 42% from three. He's going to be back. They're getting Klay Thompson back from injury. They've still got the young James Wiseman now in his second year working up. They could have a good year and get back to the levels of contention that they were back in 2015, 2016. Dallas Mavericks still have Luka Doncic. Last year's playoff run against the Clippers, admittedly, it was a short run, only 7 games, but 36 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. That's pretty solid for a third-year player, I'd say. So he's still there. The Portland Trailblazers, it's Dame time in Portland as always. Last year in the playoffs, 34 points per game on 44% from three. But the worry for them is that Dame's time might be up. They simply have not gotten him a lot of help. They had one conference finals run 3 years ago in 2018 where they just got swept by a far superior Warriors team, and they haven't even been back to that since. So with all these teams, the question isn't about the star, it's about the supporting cast. Which one of them do you think has the best shot?
Golden State, maybe. I don't know what to make of Golden State, honestly, because they're in a position where you've got Curry playing at an MVP level. You've got Klay Thompson coming back, albeit with a lot of questions. So you would think that, okay, they want to win now. They're trying to keep up in that Pacific Division at this moment, but they didn't try to trade away either their past 2 first-round draft picks for any immediate help in Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. So it's hard to tell what exactly Golden State is trying to do, potentially balancing winning now and winning in the future. So
yeah, I'm
not too sure about them. I think I would have to go with Portland out of those teams you mentioned, just because, I mean, this is it. Damian Lillard, is going to be giving it everything he's got because he knows if it doesn't happen this year, it's not going to happen for me in Portland. I'm out of here. You got Chauncey Billups coming in, and the hope in Portland is that he can improve that defense because the defense was a serious issue last year. So the Blazers, I think they've got the offense with Lillard. I think they've got some decent help around him. But if the defense can improve, and I think it will, with some players added as well, along with Billups, I think they'll have a pretty good shot.
Yeah.
So I'll take Portland.
Yeah, I think my favorite, or like the thing I'll most remember about last year's playoffs, other than the finals, this was back when we were moving over the summer, but it was the Bucks-Nuggets series, and it was that one game that went to like 4 overtimes, and I was watching it on NBA TV with my little brother, and like every time down the court, Lillard would pull up from 30, 33 feet or so, and it would go in. That was literally the Trailblazers' offense for about the last 2 overtimes. And the Nuggets ended up escaping. And the defining 2 plays for that were a cross-court pass by Jokic to, I want to say it was one of the Plumlee brothers on his team who made a 3. And the Blazer, who tried to tip it away, ended up tripping over his own feet and falling down. So it was basically an uncontested shot. And then a couple possessions later, with the Blazers trying to match that, a pass went right through C.J. McCollum's hands and out of bounds. So, like, that was the defining moment for me because it's literally just Damian Lillard hucking it up from 35. That is not sustainable in the playoffs at all, not really even in the regular season. And as you said, he knows it. If he can't do it this year, he's not going to do it. They've tried. C.J. McCollum's a really good second supporting piece, but that's not enough in this Western Conference. And other than that, really, there's not a whole lot of teams to go about. A lot of players of note, but other than that, Ja Morant's going to be pretty good for Memphis, but they're probably play-in bound again. Zion Williamson had 27 points a game last year, but we're not sure how healthy he is. We're not sure whether Brandon Ingram's going to be able to make the leap, so the Pelicans are probably play-in bound. Karl Anthony Towns of the Timberwolves finished top 20 in scoring last year, but Timberwolves' defense has been rough, especially when their 3 most important players, Towns, D'Angelo Russell, and Anthony Edwards, all are known for not being great at defense. Sacramento Kings, they've got De'Aaron Fox. He's pretty good. Oklahoma City Thunder have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but like other than the teams we mentioned before, I don't really see any of these teams having a shot at the second round, much less a conference finals or finals appearance.
So Tuesday night, this coming October 19th, it's going to be the Brooklyn Nets at the Milwaukee Bucks, a rematch of conference semifinals last year, that series that went to 7 games and came Kevin Durant shoe size away from Brooklyn moving on instead of Milwaukee. So that'll be the first game, and then Golden State at the Los Angeles Lakers for the second leg of the doubleheader. So it should be fun to watch Tuesday night. And with that, we'll move on to hockey, which is already underway. Started on Tuesday night. Tampa Bay Lightning are the defending champions. They beat Montreal in the Stanley Cup final last year. And we'll start with them in the Atlantic Division. Tampa, not quite as certain as it was going from the 2020 season to last year's season, but that core is still insanely good. Nikita Kucherov is a perennial Hart Trophy candidate. Braden Point's really good. Steven Stamkos is incredible. That offense is going to be phenomenal. And then, of course, Andrei Vasilevsky is excellent in goal. Only difference is you look further down, maybe third, fourth line. There are some changes on the offense. Yanni Gourde, Barclay Goodrow, Blake Coleman are all gone now, but they've brought in Corey Perry, Zach Bogosian, and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare to fill it in. So we'll see how that meshes for the Lightning, but they're going to be really, really good.
I think my biggest question for them is, only 5 other teams have had a three-peat in NHL history, and a lot of those teams were similar runs where it's they three-peated, then they got, upset one year, and then they returned the next year and did it again, similar to the Chicago Bulls of the 90s where they three-peated, took a couple years off, then three-peated again. So I think the biggest question for the Lightning is championship fatigue. Eventually, after now 2 straight years of extended playoff runs, do you wear down quicker than the other teams? Are you mentally worn down? Is it just we've already got 2. Why do we need 3? That's going to be the biggest question for the Lightning this year.
Toronto Maple Leafs, you know the narrative. 5 straight first-round exits in the postseason. They haven't won a series in the playoffs since 2004. Now here they are. The core's still there. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, William Nylander can all score at a prolific rate. And, they're going to have a great regular season. Just can they get it done in April and May?
Well, Matthews led the league last year with 41 goals. Shout out to me for knowing that. But, as you said, the question is, can they get it done in the playoffs? And it's similar to what we see with Portland and Damian Lillard, I'd argue, because, sure, you've got that one great scorer in the regular season, but when you start going into the playoffs where it's a lot more important for teams to make sure that they can get stops and they start, paying extra attention to Austin Matthews, does Toronto have another guy who can step up?
Boston Bruins, the team that eliminated them back-to-back years in 2018 and 2019, their core's still around as well. Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, Patrice Bergeron, and Brad Marchand are still phenomenal goal scorers. But behind them, and then on the defensive side of things, some more questions regarding the Bruins. And then in goal, Tuukka Rask no longer there. They bring in Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman, a rookie, to fill in his spot. So we'll see how things go in the net. But Bruins probably slowly starting to regress from the many years of excellence they've enjoyed in the 2010s, but should still be a fairly high-end contender this year.
Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, the difficulty is going to be division. It's similar to what we've seen with teams like Phoenix and Golden State in the NBA. If you keep playing contenders like Tampa Bay night after night after night, eventually your record's going to start suffering.
So those are probably the big three. To round out the Atlantic, Florida could easily take Boston's place. They should be a surefire playoff team. With the offensive Alexander Barkov, Jonathan Huberdeau. They've added Joe Thornton. They've re-signed Carter Verhaeghe, Anthony Duclair. They should be in a great position to score, and then getting Aaron Ekblad back defensively after his season-ending leg injury last year will be key. And then the goaltending situation, Spencer Knight is a Calder Trophy, at least one of the favorites, but he'll have to take over for Sergei Bobrovsky at some point. So some questions in net, but you've got a really good option up and coming. So Florida should be a playoff team. And then Montreal, after going to last season's Stanley Cup Finals, expected to fall off quite a bit. They lost a lot of talent with Shea Weber, Philip Deneau, Tomas Tatar, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi all gone, but they still have some firepower. Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki still there. Jonathan Drouin is back and looked re-energized, had a nice game in Toronto the other night. So Montreal expected to take a step back. Only question is how far.
Well,
then,
they beat Vegas last year in the conference semifinals, I believe it was. So that was as shocking for them, it might be, as it was for Vegas. So now I think they might actually not take as big a step back as people think, just because the mentality is, we can't do anything wrong. If we take a step back, it's just like people are like, oh, we're right, the upset was an upset. But if they keep performing well, then it's like, okay, great, we're still keeping up that playoff level of intensity. I mean, I don't think they're going to be as good as Stanley Cup Finals like they were last year, but they're still going to be a difficult out in the playoffs.
Moving on to the Metropolitan Division, it is stacked. Maybe one clear favorite, and then a lot of other teams very close behind in hot pursuit. The Islanders are the favorite to win the division. They're coming off a conference finals appearance last year, fell to the Lightning in that one in 7 games, but they're coming back. They're well coached. They're deep, especially in forwards. They don't have a ton of standout players. Matt Barzal is a great talent, obviously, but they've got players that know their role. They're going to play it and can fill it in from top to bottom, both offensively and defensively. Goaltending is going to be fantastic with Semyon Varlamov and Ilya Sorokin. So the Islanders should be back as well. And then the other New York team, the Rangers, trying to turn things around after missing the playoffs last year. They've got a new identity. They pushed out the head coach and the team president, and they've got sort of a new regime now that focuses on being tough, not getting pushed around. We all know what happened with Tom Wilson and the Capitals at the end of last season, but Rangers are going to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen again. They've got all the offensive talent they could need with guys like Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad. Adam Fox can contribute from the defensive end as well. He's the defending Norris Trophy champion as the league's best defender. Goaltending should be doing all right as well with Igor Shesterkin, a young stud back there. Only question, the defense behind Adam Fox is a little bit iffy for the Rangers, and then how well will the new guys come in and really enforce that attitude of toughness the Rangers are trying to employ.
Well, I think the most interesting New York team is actually going to be the one up in Buffalo. I think that the Sabres, they're not going to be in contention necessarily, but I certainly think they're going to be interesting to keep an eye on. So Jack Eichel, their number 2 pick back in 2015, missed all of last year with a herniated disc in his neck, I believe it was, and he's had some disagreements with the team over the way that was handled, over the way they handled it, over the way, his surgery was handled and all that stuff. He has currently been stripped of his captaincy, despite the fact that he's still under contract, an 8-year, $80 million contract. So he might be forced to stick it out for the long run, and that's not necessarily something that's good for any of the parties here. And there's the fact that Buffalo's also under a 9-year playoff drought. They were hoping Eichel could be the guy to maybe drag them out of it, but now it doesn't look like he's going to be able to.
Moving on with the Metropolitan, Carolina should be another threat as well. They've been solid the last few seasons. Offensive star power is there for sure. Only question is defense and goaltending. Pittsburgh, without their 2 stars, Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby to start the year, but proved they could win, went on the road to beat Tampa Bay convincingly on opening night on Tuesday. So we'll see how they can keep things rolling. Offense, until Malkin and Crosby get back, could be a little bit inconsistent. Defense and goaltending don't jump off the page either, but Penguins obviously have all kinds of experience and a winning pedigree. So does Washington. Their offense looked great as usual against the Rangers on Wednesday night. They've got plenty of firepower there. Only issue is goaltending. Ilya Samsonov, only 19 appearances last season in the COVID-shortened year. So a lot of kind of similar standing teams in the Metropolitan. Islanders really the only one that kind of stands out, can break away from the pack, but anything really goes with the other 4 or 5.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Capitals. I think the big thing to keep an eye on there, well, you mentioned the goaltending isn't great, so they might end up getting in a lot of high-scoring battles, and that's conducive to what Alex Ovechkin is trying to do. Basically, the Tom Brady of hockey, 36 years old, but just signed a 5-year extension. If he scores at his normal goal-scoring pace this year, he could potentially take the number 3 spot all-time for goals scored.
Wow. Already has 2 Wednesday night. Looked great. 35, 36 years old, I think it is now. Still looking as good as he did when he was a rookie. So props to Alex Ovechkin, still rolling, trying to chase down Wayne Gretzky's goal record. It's going to be a long way to go, but if there's anybody to do it, Ovechkin's the guy. As we move on to the Western Conference, starting in the Central Division, which I think I can say with confidence will be won by the Colorado Avalanche. They are a high-end Stanley Cup contender coming out of that Central Division. They've got all kinds of firepower with Nathan McKinnon, a Hart Trophy candidate, Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, and then the defense, one of the best in the league as well. They played a really complete game in their opening night win over Chicago on Wednesday night, and then they've got strong goaltending as well. Philip Grubauer moved on to Seattle, but they brought in Darcy Kemper, who's had some proven success in the league, to fill his place. So Colorado, no doubt about it, should be a favorite to win the Central and one of the favorites to win the Stanley Cup.
I bet they should.
So after that, Central, pretty big drop-off. Winnipeg is probably the next team down the line. They've got maybe the best top 6 forwards in the league, with guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, Blake Wheeler. Winnipeg's loaded, but behind that with the defense, a little bit of a question mark for sure, and then the depth of the forwards too. Connor Hellebuyck's one of the best goaltenders in the league and probably an early favorite to win the Calder or the Vezina Trophy for the league's best goaltender. So Winnipeg, probably the next team chasing down Colorado. Dallas should be up there as well. Had a really rough down year after going to the Stanley Cup final in the 2019-20 season, but they should be able to get things back in form. St. Louis could be there as well. Maybe, maybe not. The offense, with or without Vladimir Tarasenko, has some talent, but the defense, goaltending, questionable on those ends. And then Minnesota, coming off a big season last year with Kirill Kaprizov showing out as a rookie. They've got plenty of explosiveness. Defense looks really good. But behind the offense, behind Kaprizov, Fiala, and Joel Eriksson-Ek, they're 3 big names with forwards. Pretty good drop-off with the Wild, so we'll see how things play out there. Colorado, clear favorite in the Central, and then big nosedive from there, I would say. So with that, we'll go to the Pacific. Vegas is the favorite, no doubt about that, after going to the Stanley Cup Final in their inaugural season in 2018. They've been a perennial playoff contender and division winner ever since, and they've got all kinds of depth. They've got a great goaltender in Robin Leonard. They should be back on top of the division. And then the Seattle Kraken played Vegas on opening night and played a very close game. Seattle got their first win of the season last night against Nashville, 4-3 on the road. Offense, not great with them. They've got Jordan Eberle. They've got a couple other decent scores in Jaden Schwartz, Jared McCann, and Jonas Donskoy. But aside from that, not a ton of depth for Seattle, but who knows? Team in their first year, every player's coming from the same situation, can create a lot of unity. We saw it with Vegas in their inaugural season.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
maybe Seattle can do the same.
People have been saying that they've got the best chance probably for a Vegas-style run. I mean, you mentioned Eberle, Philip Grubauer, Adam Larson are some pretty solid players that they've got. I think the key for them is just going to be not getting ahead of themselves because, as we saw with Vegas, it was kind of like an underdog mentality for them back in 2018. It was more of just like, everybody doubted us. Our teams let us go, so now we're here. We might as well show them what we can do. I think that Seattle's going to have to keep that mentality because we saw with Vegas, they've kind of lost that mentality. They've now got the mentality more so of we're contenders now. We are legit. We are tough to beat. And that might be why they're losing to teams like the Canadiens in the playoffs, is because they're coming in with really high expectations and low preparation.
And finally, the last team to cover as a contender is Edmonton, coming out of the Pacific Division. Y'all know the story about Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. That offense with the Oilers is phenomenal at the top end. And then the depth has been improved as well behind them, with Zach Hyman being signed, Warren Foegele being traded from Carolina, Hyman coming from Toronto. So the offense should be great for Edmonton. They already have looked pretty solid in their first couple of games of the season. Defense is a question mark. Goaltending is a question mark, with a 39-year-old Mike Smith as their top guy, and then an inconsistent Mikko Koskinen behind him, joining him in tandem. So Edmonton offense should be great, but aside from that, maybe some questions, but hockey, basketball, ready to roll. Hockey already underway. Basketball set to go on Tuesday night. And, Brennan, we've got one more sport left to cover here.
Baseball.
And
you know what that means. What is happening? Which is a question I ask myself every time I turn on the television and there is baseball on, because I do not enjoy that sport. Anyway, let's get to talking. The NLDS and ALDS have both concluded, if I am correct in saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the ALCS starts tonight. The Red Sox versus the Houston Astros.
2018 rematch.
Oh, boy. Remember what happened in 2018? Anyway, yeah, so that game starts. The Sox beat the Yankees in a wild card game and then shockingly upset the Rays in the divisional round, so that's going to be interesting. They both look good. The Red Sox actually have a former Astros manager in the dugout, I believe. And then last night, perhaps the best divisional series we've ever seen concluded between the Dodgers and the Giants. Both teams over 105 wins on the year, forced to play each other in the divisional round. Kenley Jansen gets the win for the Dodgers. 1 inning pitched, 2 strikeouts. Dodgers didn't take the lead for good until the 9th with a Cody Bellinger single that scored Justin Turner. But then, here's where we get into the what is happening.
Here we go.
A very, very, extraordinarily tough call as it was happening on Wilmer Flores. Struck out swinging, according to the first-base umpire, with 2 outs and a man on. But if you've seen that replay, you know it doesn't look like a full swing.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, so the Giants come into that Game 5. They started Logan Webb. He was dominant in Game 1, and they go in 6 or 7 scoreless innings against the Dodgers, one of the best offenses in the league. He comes back out. Some people thinking, oh, there's no way he repeats that performance again in a winner-take-all game. He went 7 innings, giving up only 1 earned run. The kid's only 24. Incredible stuff from Webb. Then you get to that 9th inning. Giants are down 2-1. Max Scherzer comes into the game, a perennial Cy Young candidate, maybe perennial Cy Young favorite. But he comes in. Giants, the Cinderella story really of the regular season, going from a mediocre to below mediocre projection going into 2021 to being the best team in baseball, quite frankly. But Scherzer against the Giants, 3 outs. Giants get a man on base by way of an error. Wilmer Flores at the plate, and with 2 strikes, checks his swing. Umpire says he went around, and you always get that side angle from the dugout. And if the bat points beyond straight, so you get the bat coming from behind home plate and goes out towards the pitcher, and if it gets over halfway across toward the pitcher's mound, you'd say it's a swing. It did not get there. It was very, very clear. The broadcasters saw it. All the fans saw it.
Immediately.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They were furious.
There was no doubt, and that's just a brutal way. Giants had such a remarkable season coming out of nowhere to be a really fun team. It stinks to see it end that way, but we've got 2 rematches coming up in the championship series, so that will be fun.
Another remarkable season. How about the Atlanta Braves?
Yeah.
Only 88 wins, but in my opinion, a pretty shocking upset of the Braves in the divisional round, winning that series in 4 games, a 5-4 victory after, Freddie Freeman hit a home run in the 8th, 428
off
feet.
Josh Hader,
Ooh.
one of the best closers in baseball.
So Atlanta coming in, don't have Ronald Acuna Jr. They lost him to injury earlier this year, but that looks like a fun team. So it's really Cinderella versus the King in the NLCS, and then in the East, in the AL, it's the we're not cheaters anymore, guys, please forgive us, versus the Red Sox.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was watching the Michael Kay show out of New York yesterday, and they were posing the question to various callers, if you're a Yankee fan, who are you rooting for in that series? Because you've got your traditional, I hate the Red Sox, that old rivalry between Boston and New York, but you also have Houston, who Yankee fans think robbed them of a World Series appearance in 2017.
They did.
Okay, maybe.
They definitely did.
There's no definitive way of telling, but Yankees fans think it, and then they think Jose Altuve had the buzzer on in 2019 to walk them off in the ALCS then. So, who do you root for in that series as a Yankee fan?
If I'm a Yankees fan, what I root for is a grueling 7-game series that involves Tommy John surgery for at least 4 pitchers by the end of it. And then the winner of that series immediately gets swept in the World Series.
Well, it wasn't the pitcher's fault that the Astros were cheating.
I don't care. Oh, maybe a couple home plate collisions that result in torn ACLs for all participants. I don't know.
Goodness.
But it's certainly going to be interesting to watch because all 4 of these teams left are really talented, both with the bats and with the pitchers. All of them have pretty deep bullpens, too. It's going to be interesting to watch the rest of the way.
Yep, so that'll about do it for episode number 9. Before you watch your hockey, before you watch your basketball, and before you watch your baseball, watch your Junior Jays take on Papio South on the football field tonight at 7 p.m. And we'll be back next week. Probably back to 1 episode.
Probably.
Yes.
Yeah,
if time permits. We can condense things a little bit if we need to. So.
And we might be able to go over Heisman candidates next week.
Yeah, so Wednesday morning will be the target. Brennan and I will be back then. But until then, have a great weekend, everybody. See you next time.